Well, this is the tape where you'll see why we tend to get discouraged in our 30s, our 40s, or our 50s. I mean, something takes place in our life. If we're not aware of it, it can really drain our energy, even push us to depression. We're going to show you that there's 5 areas of your life that's very important. In fact, these areas make up who you are. I mean, it's your identity. It's like you as a mate, you as a friend, you as a worker, you as a parent, you in your spiritual life. Those 5 areas, now it's going to be in other areas, but those 5 areas are very important for you to understand how to develop those areas, because as you do, it gives you energy. As you have problems in those areas, it drains our energy and can push us, as I said, to depression. So I know this tape is going to be very vital during especially your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I know you're going to get excited about it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. A most warm audience, and I appreciate your enthusiasm, your excitement about these ideas, because I know you're as excited about your marriage as I am. I know you want your friendships to be stronger as I do, and so I'm thrilled to be involved with you in this process. I think this session that we're about to go into is so vital that I don't want anybody to miss it. This is something that's going to remind you and allow you to do some very specific things to keep your energy level up as you're going through life. Because we're always going to be in crisis. Marriage, family, friends, business, whatever. And you want to keep your energy as high as possible, so as you go through these phases, you won't be susceptible to discouragement, unhappiness, loss of energy, and so on. So I want to say, I don't want you to miss this. It's kind of like the priest who was golfing with this angry man. And he was embarrassed, the priest was, because when the guy would miss a shot, he'd swear and throw his clubs and so on. So they got like the 3rd hole, and he misses his shot. He says, I can't believe I missed. And he throws his club, almost hits the people behind him. You know, the priest is real embarrassed. He swears. The priest walks over to him and says, I just got to warn you about something. There is an angel called Zapriel that if you continue this, I have heard of situations where he will zap you in reproof for your attitude and behavior such as you're doing. The guy says, yeah. So they go on. They get about the 13th hole. He misses again. He goes, oh, I can't believe I missed. He wraps his club around a tree, swears, makes a big deal. I missed. And the priest goes, oh, I warned you. All of a sudden, the clouds start to part, and there's this bolt of lightning coming out of heaven. Goes, it just zaps this priest. And you hear up in heaven, I can't believe I missed again. Now, the reason I share that is because I don't want you to miss this. I don't want to miss it myself. This session is changing me, has changed me, and it's made me aware of some things that I can anticipate now and go through the rest of my life realizing that I can do some things to see my own energy level going up instead of just assuming that everything around me is going to affect me beyond my control. No, I've got some control here that I can do something very specific. And the way I want to illustrate this is that when I was growing up as a kid, a lot of very dangerous things happened to me. I was raised out in the state of Washington, out in the country, and just got into a lot of messes as a kid. But the worst thing that ever happened to me as about a 12-year-old boy is I was running full speed through a field with one of my best friends to his house from my house. I was taking a shortcut. And we cut through the woods, and we were running down this hill, just going as little kids will go. And all of a sudden, we heard this. All around us. And it sounded like a symphony of rattles. And what we had run into was an entire den of rattlesnakes. And I panicked instantly along with my friend, and we jumped up on this log that had, fallen down in the woods, and it was about this high off the ground, and we started screaming. We were crying, we basically needed diapers, and but it was a real fearful experience because we really thought this was it, we were going to be dead. We screamed and screamed, and no one heard us. We were too far into the woods, and so we realized it was late in the afternoon, so we realized that before long it was going to be dark. We had to get out of there. We didn't want to spend the night on that log, and we didn't know where the snakes crawl up on logs anyway at night, but we could see them. As we stood there, see these snakes here, down on the ground, right here? Well, there were like hundreds of them all around, all rattling, and it was the fall, so the skin was growing over their eyes, so they can't really see. They just strike at things that are warm around them, and so we realized that we probably didn't have long to live. So we made a decision that we would break off a limb, just like this one, similar to this one, and we decided to bend over the log, and the snakes that we could reach, we were going to flip away from us, and just as exactly the way I'm doing here, and there wasn't anybody else around, so, we... I just want you to empathize with me, and and so what we were doing is we had to bend over the log first in order to do this. Okay, then we gingerly stepped down off the log and we looked around. He was watching this section, I was watching this section. Any of them that were crawling, we had to just flip them a little bit further away. And as we moved about 1 foot every so many minutes, we only had about 30 feet to go, but it seemed like it took us forever, and crying the entire time, wondering, knowing that if we had slipped on a rock or fallen in any way, we'd have fallen into them because they were that close to us. All different sizes. When we finally made it through, of course, we ran as fast as we could, crying, and we ran in there and told the whole experience. The people responsible for that type of thing in our community, a small community, went out with a bulldozer and they found several hundred rattlesnakes that were trying to bed down for the winter. Well, that was a crisis in my life, not unlike many of the crises that we go through during our lifetime. Well, what would have happened if I would have had a pair of boots like this on that had reinforced leather on top of the boot, and it was up to about right here? I had run into these snakes. This was the crisis. What would I have done? Would I have jumped up on the log? No, I wouldn't have had to do that at all. I could have done this. Hey, nice going. Sure, strike me, see if I care. Go over here and say, boom, okay. A lot of energy. The opposite was true. We were losing energy rapidly. I could have had energy. What this session is about is how you can build several layers of leather, put a boot on, and build those leather layers up, and actually go through life, and when you meet certain crises, know and have the confidence that you can go through it without it taking you out or destroying you or causing you to lose too much energy. But there's something very specific that you can do to actually gain energy. Now, part of the truth of this session is that we all tend to go through pretty normal stages of life. It's about every 10 years that we go through a different phase or a stage. We go through a transition period at the end of that stage, like a big one is 13 years of age to 22 years of age. Many things happen in there, but we tend to change into a new phase at 22. And then the next one is at 32, and the next one at 42, next one at 52. And the reason those are there is because of marriage and job change and children leaving the home and the size of our body and various things affect how we go through those phases. Well, as you hit those changes, and if you hit a crisis during those changes in our life, you can do some things very specifically to keep yourself energetic and alive and less susceptible to the things that would discourage us during those transition periods. And when you're in the different transitions, like 20s, usually hopeful, a lot of expectations, dreams for the future. Then you get into the 30s and you start experiencing those dreams. And is it reality coming and so on. And then you get into your 40s and your little more reality check. Is what I was dreaming actually coming true in various areas of my life? And you know, when you're in the 40s, you have more mobility. A lot of times your children are leaving, so you have the empty nest stage, and that really affects I see women oftentimes a lot more than it does males. The guys are usually pretty excited the kids are going. The mothers are weeping that they're going. And so this one couple, in fact, I got a letter recently about this one couple who, this is a true story, where they were standing in an airline line in front of the ticket agent, and his wife said, because their kids were gone, they had enough money now to start traveling a little more, a new phase, and she said, okay, this is it. This is the last time we are going to a place we've already been before. Next time we go somewhere together, I want to go somewhere where we have never been. Now remember, they're standing in line. Okay, he says out loud, why don't we go to our kitchen together next time? Okay, of course she reacts to that. Everybody laughs around them. 40s. 50s, 60s, I'm getting to the age where, you know, when you're in the 60s or older years, you know when you're entering into the older days, when you bend over to tie your shoelaces and you wonder if there's anything else you can do while you're down there. Different phase, see. So, yeah. What we want to do is make sure that we make these decisions together or as an individual to say, what can I do to keep my energy as high as possible, to cut down on the potential of discouragement, even depression. And the key to understanding what the potential of a man going through a midlife crisis. I didn't like going through midlife crisis, but now I understand what was going on in my life. If I had known this before, I could have avoided some of the pain that I experienced. Okay, here's some steps that I'm going to give you on keeping yourself high in energy and decreasing the potential of discouragement and depression. Number one, simple as this. Slow down now and then throughout these 10-year, quote, periods of your life, just to check how your identity is doing. I'm going to explain that. Our identity is sort of like, and I'll just get inside here, but our identity is sort of like me inside this fenced-in area here. This is me. Everything inside this represents who I am. Now, let's say that what makes up who I am is like a garden. So every part of, if I say I'm Gary Smalley or I'm Gary Smalley something else, what makes up who I am, what makes up who you are, and you've got your hand out that I'm going to ask you to help me do this session together. So be watching that in just a moment. Let's take lettuce as part of my garden. Okay, what is lettuce going to represent? My job. I'm a worker. I'm a speaker. I'm a writer. Who am I? I am a writer, a speaker, a counselor. That's part of what my job is. Look at I'm a husband, my mate. So let's say that's the carrots. And I have several carrots in here. These are the girls I dated before we married, so we put those in here. There's another one down here. Just have one. And here's my, I'm a parent. Okay, so that's the cucumbers. And what condition is my garden in that area? And who am I in that area? I have friends, and so that's part of my identity, my garden, is that I have friends. I have certain sporting things that I'm involved in. I'm Gary Smalley the what? I'm not a golfer. I used to tell people that I golfed in the 70s. And as soon as I got to that score, I walked off the golf course. This represents my spiritual life, major part of my life, and major part of a lot of people's lives in our country. How is that growing in my garden, and who am I in relation to that? And so this makes up who I am. It's kind of like if we just look at our life, we say, well, it's made up of various vegetables. Each one of them represent some particular part of my life. Okay? Now, as we look at that part, another part, of course, of my life is my physical makeup as the major part of my identity. Gary Smalley what? Am I in physical shape or whatever? Recently, I had an experience that applies to this very specifically in that I went to the Cooper Clinic in Dallas. It's they specialize in what condition our heart is in. And as I have said on previous videos, I come from a family where the males don't fare real well when it comes to cholesterol and heart attacks. My father died in his 50s. My brother died at 51. My oldest brother had a massive heart attack at 51 and almost died. Has had another heart attack. I'm 53, no heart attacks yet. We don't think yet, anyway. And so I go and I get checked now and then. So I was at the Cooper Clinic this last year, and I go through all the tests, and I get to the end, and the specialist is reviewing all the records. And there's sort of a lull in the meeting, and I look up on the wall in his office, and there's a picture of the Titanic. You know, the big ship from England that was supposed to be unsinkable that went under. Okay, and I laughed, I was trying to make light of some of the information he was giving me. And I said, hey, you got a picture of the Titanic here. I said, that's really interesting that you'd have a picture like that in your office with, talking to guys about their heart and so on and so on. He says, that's interesting that you would bring that up. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He said, you know why I have that in here? And I said, no. And he said, have you ever heard about the Titanic? And I said, no. I was just pointing it out, I haven't heard that much about it. I know it's at the bottom of the ocean, but I don't know anything else about it. He says it's very interesting that the captain, the experienced captain of that ship, was warned 6 separate, specific times to slow down and change course and take the southern route because there were sightings of icebergs in that area. He disregarded all 6 warnings because he was the captain, and he said, this is the unsinkable. Boom. Hit the iceberg, went down, a lot of people died. Disaster, major crisis. He looked at me, he said, Mr. Smalley, how many times have you been warned about your heart? I went, ugh, quite a few times. He says, what do I have to say to you this time that your cholesterol level is too high? That you've got to start doing something about your diet. Well, this sort of represents my body. And he challenged me to eat less of these little things and less of the other things. And I was having a ball because, I was taking different things that I thought was going to eliminate the problem, but it wasn't. So I did have to continue taking those. But he got my attention. He slowed me down. And that part of my identity, I want to be as strong as possible. And the reason is the next point. Second thing that we can do to keep our energy high. That is, we want to inspect each part of our identity to make sure that it's healthy. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. We have something that takes place in our life, or the potential every day. This is the key to this entire session right here. We're going to say that each one of the different parts of our identity has a thermostat on it. So that we set that thermostat at 70 degrees, let's say, because we want to be comfortable, whether it's cold out or warm out. We want to be comfortable. So we set the thermostat at 70 degrees. But let's say that the thermometer says 40 degrees. There's a big spread between 70 and 40, so we know something's broken, something not functioning the way it should. We're losing energy if it's too cold. We're losing energy if it's too hot. But what's actually happening here is there is a spread in reality from what is expected. I expect it to be 70 degrees, but in reality it's 40 degrees. So there's a big spread. That's the same thing is true with each different part of our identity, each part of our garden that makes up who we are. If our job, for example, either male or female, but it's very important for males, if our job is quite a bit different in reality than what we expect, we're losing energy every day. That's the loss of energy. This is what brings on midlife crisis for males when the expectation of what you wanted to experience on your job is not actually what you're experiencing. And then if you got to have about 5 of your main identity factors have to be healthy and alive. In other words, your reality and expectation need to be as close as possible because you use less energy and you actually gain energy when the temperature is closer to what you actually set it to be. In other words, it doesn't matter what area you have, if the main areas of your identity, you've got your hand out here. So let me just ask you some questions on this. I'll just get some volunteers. What's some of the main parts of your identity in your own garden? What would you say on this list would be some of your main ones? Anybody? They make up who you are. You say, I am, and then you say, which ones would be some of your main ones? For you. What? Worker. Okay, so he says, I'm a worker. What do you do? A painter. So that's part of his identity. Now, see, if he has an identity where what he expects is looking like this, maybe he wanted this to be really healthy, but in fact, that is paint. So we needed to have that look as bad as we could, so we said, we'll just put a little paint on it. But that looks pretty sad all by itself. This would be losing a lot of energy if what you expected to have as a worker is not exactly what you're seeing fulfilled. It's not reality. Then you're going to use energy. In fact, there's one theory that I love reading about and understanding that says that every time any part of our garden starts to spread out in reality versus what we expect, we start losing a lot of energy and using a lot of energy because our brain, this theory proposes, is always working to bring it back closer to reality and to what you expect. So you're using all that energy all day long and sometimes even at night to get things back to balance and to what you expect. So if it's a number of those areas, then you're more susceptible to great losses of energy as well as then more susceptible when you hit the crises because your boot is really thin. You don't have this guard. Whereas each one of these factors of our identity is actually a layer of that leather. Take my son, Greg, for example. Big part of his identity is his job. He's a counselor and a speaker. He and I have talked about him speaking with me at my live seminars. He's wanted to do it for a number of years. He's 25 years old now. So he said, what do you think about this year? And I said, great, I'm thrilled. I can hardly wait to do this as a team with my son or sons or daughter or any part of my family. I would love doing that. So this year was the first time. So here he practiced and he memorized, and we had one practice session in front of a group of people, so he felt confident. So several months ago now, we have our first seminar where he's going to present his first presentation in front of about 2,000 people. He's a little nervous, and he gets up in front of those people after I introduce him, and I almost get choked up, and I'm hugging him, and I go down and sit in the third row, and I'm thinking, that's my son, and he starts off. And about halfway through, he forgets where he is. And he doesn't have his notes. He thought he could do it without notes. And so he starts stumbling. And I can see him losing saliva. And when a speaker loses saliva, it's all over, and then it's downhill. So he's looking around for his notes, and he finds them, and he starts up again. He lays his notes down, and he forgets again. And he loses more saliva. So he comes back, and the people are all trying to help him, and I'm down there going, yes, you'll make it. Yes. And he goes back 3 times, and he forgets where he is. He finished his presentation. Of course, it was his first time, so the people were real appreciative. They weren't, he did a great job, what he was saying, but he felt terrible about it. He felt worse than this. He was spread out, massive energy loss. That's exactly what I could see. You could see the energy draining out of him. He goes back to the back of the auditorium, sees some of our friends and other staff members, but he's really hurting. After the session, he comes to me, he says, Dad, I really feel bad about this. He said, do you have any words or anything? And I said, yeah. There's one thing comes to my mind. Remember this. It's always darkest just before it goes totally black. And he said, Dad, thanks a lot for your encouragement. It was a total blackout for him. And it was one of those crisis experiences, all right? Now, see, what's important is that the other 4 major areas of his life were strong. So it didn't have the same effect. He bounced right back. You put weakness in some of those other areas, As a married couple, if you have children, do you have the potential of being in crisis with kids? Absolutely. Where's the parenting one? Right here. This one can brown out and break in half, in fact, in seconds, any given day. They leave the home, they rebel, empty nest, so on. There's crises there. You want to make sure you have at least 5 areas that are strong. And I mentioned already the physical part of our life. You know, here's the situation with the physical part. I can hold that up. We'll use this as our body, okay? It doesn't really matter if we're overweight, underweight, whatever size we are, providing you don't have expectations to be something different than you are. The issue is, do you feel really uncomfortable about what you are physically? Because is it really different from what you expect and what's reality? If it is, that's draining your energy every day. If it isn't, and you want to reduce that expectation reality, then you won't be losing as much energy as you otherwise would. See, the issue is what you perceive about that part of your garden and what other people you think are thinking. So it's like the guy who had a friend who said, you know what, you gained a little weight. He said, I think you ought to go on a diet. And when I talked to him, I said, how's your diet going? He says, well, I'm on 2 diets now. And I said, really? He said, yeah, one of them didn't give me enough to eat. So, okay. What I'd like to do is give you 3 ways that you can actually discover and develop your own identity, your own garden, and then bring your expectations closer to reality. What do you do to actually bring them closer to reality? Okay, so number 1 is you actually pick the areas that you see and pick 5 very important ones that you see are the most important ones and list those. Now you're going to have more, obviously, but you want to pick the ones that are important to you, okay? Now, secondly, what you want to do is relist each one of these according to the priority. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to do this on your own. I'd like to have you list what are the most important ones to you, and then I would like to have you start listing what's number 1. And it could change tomorrow, and you may readjust this so you know you're not fixing this into cement. But I'd like to have you right now and using your manual, your handout, to actually list what makes up who I am and what are the most important things of who I am. Number 1, number 2, number 3, because then I want to ask you to respond. Just different of you volunteer to say, well, this is the most important one to me, or this is second, or this is third. So on your mark, get set, go. Okay, let me get some of you to respond. What would you consider a number 1 to some of you? When you say who you are, what's one of the major parts of your garden that in your mind is right up there at the top? Mate, okay? That's who you are, and that's a very important one. What's another one? Spiritual, very important. What's another one? Job, okay? Friend. Parent. Okay, what's interesting about this is every group I'm with, and in my own life when I started putting these down, those are the 5 that were my top. Now you're going to have 6 and 7 and 8. You're going to have many of them. But now the importance of this session is that those top 5 need to be healthy. As much as possible, what you expect is what you're actually experiencing. So your energy is going to be as the highest. Now here's the reason why that's so important. Because we're going to show you a demonstration here where, look at this jar of beans, all different colors, different sizes. Let's say that this jar represents all the things that you could do in life. All the activities, all the things you could be, everything that you could experience that makes up who you are, okay? Let's say that this jar represents the most important things to you. See, there's a lot of good things in life. But there's only a very few best things that we want to spend our time and energy on, making sure those things are healthy. Now watch what happens. If you take the most important things and just put them in with things that just, whatever you want to put in your life, there's no real priority to them. Look how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6. That's about all we can get in there. Can't even hardly shut the lid, okay? You can only get 6 in there. Now there's many left that are very important. What are we going to do with these? They're not going to get into your life. These could be very vital things that make up who you are, things that you need to spend your time doing. Watch what happens. If you put the sweetest things in life in first, things that mean the most to you, make sure you're concentrating your time and energy on building these things up. You can get all 14 of them in this jar. Now, watch this. Then you start adding other things into your life, and you can do a lot of things and get a lot of things in your life that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get in if you put first the things that are most important to you. See if this actually works. See what's happening? Even as I shake this, what's happening? See those things come to the top? You will notice that the most important things in life come to the top. And you can get all the rest of them in. Same size. Put the lid on and say, that's my life. But you know that you have the most important things. And if you shake it, you'll find that those important things rise to the top. Priority. I have a friend whose father was really successful. Vice president of one of the biggest companies in the country. Tremendous lettuce garden. I mean, his lettuce garden was flourishing. Healthy as can be. Cucumbers were all wilted, drying on the vine. His children. Major problem. That executive made a very serious decision at one point to change the nature of his garden. In my own life, I saw that spending too much time on my job was affecting my family. And I vividly remember when Michael was 1 or 2, must have been about 1, Norma would know exactly as I finish the story, where she came to me and said, with 3 children, and Mike as sick as he had been as a little baby, had to have major surgery when he was 2 weeks old because he couldn't swallow food and so on. In fact, Dr. Pepper operated on you. But anyway, he had real problems. One thing after another. If it was going to happen to anybody in life, it would have happened to Michael. And Norma said, it's just too much energy to raise these kids when you're gone all the time. Something has to happen. And I made a major decision when he was 1 to readjust my garden and start working on the cucumbers in my life. And at first I sort of was a little resentful that this part of my garden was going to be diminished in my mind. But what really happened is that he brought me back to the family. And I've thanked him for years, saying, Mike, I am so grateful that you came along because you got my priorities back the way they ought to be. And in fact, when you think about loss of energy, what do you do? What do you hear the advice in the stock market and investment? Don't they tell you to diversify your stocks so in case one goes down? That's exactly what we're talking about with our identity. Diversify your identity. Don't put all your energy into one part of your garden, because if you lose that part of your garden, then you'll have a tendency to go down rapidly because you didn't have the other areas strong and healthy, expectation and reality. And it can happen at any age. I got a letter from a mother who said that her high school girl had a massive crisis and a great loss of energy. And she explained what happened to her. She was a foreign exchange student, a part of that program where she was to go to France, and then her parents were going to take a student from France. She went to France. When she landed in that area, she got off the plane, and she had to go to the bathroom really bad. And so she started to go for the little girl's room, couldn't find it, couldn't discover where it was. And the bus driver said, you don't have time, you don't have that far to go, just get in the bus and we'll take you, and don't worry about it, you'll be there, it's not very far away. But what the bus driver neglected to tell this little girl was that they were going to drop off several of these students at various places. It wasn't very far, but it took about 2 hours to get her to her house. So by the time she got to the house, she was about to explode. She meets her guests, and they're real polite, and real excited to see her. And she says, "Excuse me, but I've got to use your bathroom immediately." She said, "Could I please?" And they said, "Oh, it's right here." And so she goes into the bathroom, she shuts the door and locks it, and discovers, to her horror and massive loss of energy, that in France, they have the kind of bathrooms where the sink and the bathtub is in one room and the toilet is in another room. She's in the sink and the bathtub room. She's too embarrassed to do anything about this. She has to go so bad. She decides that she's going to use the sink. This is a high school girl. She tries to use the sink, and it wasn't bolted adequate enough, and it falls off the wall, and it breaks the pipes. She slips and hits her head, and it knocks her out. So the hosts are seeing this water. They hear the noise, and they see this water coming out, okay? So they get the door open, they pry the door open, they find her passed out on the floor. In the condition she would have been, you can just see what's going to happen to this little girl's energy loss. They wake her up. They stand her up, and she looks down and realizes what condition she's in, and she faints. She falls on their little dog and breaks its back and kills it. She leaves France the next day. She tells her parents, "Mom, Dad, I just can't stay here. I'm so mortified." There's a little girl as a student. What does she say I am? I am a foreign exchange student. That's a major part of her garden. It just went under. Every mole that exists and bug that exists just ate it up. And so it's massive loss of energy. What was her relationship with her parents? How was that? Was that strong? What was her relationship with her friends? What was her relationship spiritually? What were the other areas of her life? If those were strong, she would have been loss of energy, but she could have made it through okay. Eventually. See, that's the key. We have to make sure that several areas of our life is strong. Well, what did we do? We have 3 things we've talked about so far. We've talked about, number 1, you want to pick what's the most important, pick the parts of your identity. Number 2, you want to pick the most important ones. Prioritize them. Make sure that the most important things are there. 3 is what you want to do is make sure that you look at them from time to time and see whether or not you're spreading out with reality and expectation. Just look at them now and then. How are they doing? What's going on? I mentioned that this gentleman who was a vice president, doing great, and his job, decided that he was going to diminish the size of his job and start spending time with his sons because what he saw his sons doing. For me, I had all 5 of those areas years ago pretty strong. And I was doing okay, I thought. And the reality and expectation, the major 5 areas of my life were okay, so I had a lot of energy. I was motivated. If I'd had a crisis hit me, it wouldn't have fazed me that much. One day, it's at evenings, about 10 o'clock at night. Greg was in college. He came home from college. He sits down on the couch. He's talking to me. I can tell something's bothering him, but I don't know what it is. He starts opening up and telling me that he's in a major crisis. At first, I went, "Yeah, right. Give me 5. And he said, "No, Dad, I'm really serious," because he can, joke about stuff and practical joke too, and catches me on a lot of stuff, and I just figured it was a practical joke. But for him, it was a major crisis. The moment I heard what he was involved in, I was in the crisis with him. So we were both going through it. As a parent, this part of my life drained out instantly. Why? Because I had some unrealistic expectations. But I didn't know it until this happened. I thought I had to be an example of a really almost, quote, perfect parent in order to be able to speak to groups about marriage and family. And that just was an expectation I had. So that when he went through his crisis, that expectation for me was spread out. And so it really took energy from me. In fact, you can go through a major crisis in any one of your major 5 areas, and it can be so big for you that it just drains them all at once. So that's why you have to make sure they're as strong as possible. So it diminishes that potential. If the stronger they are, the less potential they have of really getting discouraged. Well, I had expectations, things like, how am I going to be able to write about being a parent if things ever happen to my kids? Bigger problem is, I actually shared that with my kids as they were growing up. I said, certain things have to happen around here in order for me to be able to do this, so I, in one sense, quote, I hope you don't, goof up big time. Well, what a terrible thing to say to them. But did I know that? No, I just thought that was It was my way of thinking I was going to motivate them. What they have said to me since is that it not only didn't motivate them, it discouraged them and built unrealistic expectations. I set myself up to get spread in that area of my garden in loss of energy because I thought I had to have this stuff to write or speak or counsel. So it wasn't very realistic. So the two big things that we can do to bring our expectation closer to reality that I found by personal experience is, number one, is drop some of your expectations, especially the ones that are not realistic. See, this can be in any area, whether it's your job, your parent, you know, you name it. It can be in any area that you want. For me, I had to drop the expectation that I had to be a perfect parent. I got to see it firsthand that I didn't have to be a perfect parent. I went through this experience with Greg. It drew us closer, drew our whole family closer together. It actually strengthened us in a lot of ways, but I had to go through it to see it, so I had to get rid of those expectations. I don't have to be a perfect parent. My friend's father, what did he do? He dropped some of the expectations of having this flourishing lettuce garden, and he said, I'm just not going to be as successful in that area as that I would have otherwise been. I'm going to drop it. I'm going to lower it. I want to have a better experience as a parent. So we drop those things. Now, I'm not saying we drop, anytime we're in a crisis like this, that doesn't mean we drop it anytime we want, because there are times when we want to discuss it with somebody. It's like the couple who, the wife said, I expect for you to tell me once in a while that you love me. And he said, well, I didn't know that. So they're discussing it. And he says, I just assumed that you knew I loved you. I didn't have to say it. She says, oh, yeah, okay. Well, then let's just play that same game. Why don't you just assume that there's going to be a steak on the table, on the plate tonight, okay? You can't assume. You have to say it. Now, in that situation, when she didn't feel like her relationship with her mate was the way it ought to be, she said something about it. I would love to hear the words, the connection as a female, I love you. Have you ever had that experience when, like in a business meeting or you're in a real serious time at work or something and your wife calls and says, hun, when you come home and you're home, can you bring this or that home for dinner? You say, yeah. And then they say, tell me you love me. And you're in a meeting, there's other people around there, okay? And so you say, yeah, I'll get back to you on that. No. They don't ask what we're doing. They say, tell me you love me right now. Yeah, ditto on that. Ditto on that. No, I'm not hanging up until you tell me. Okay, I love you. See, it's more difficult for us as males. But see, that's an important point in the expectation and reality that if it isn't happening the way we would love to see it happen because of our own need in the relationship, we can talk about it and then make adjustments. Doesn't mean we have to give up all these expectations and say, well, you never tells me you love me. I guess that's my problem. That's not realistic. But where it is causing us to be spread out, where our expectation reality is draining our energy, it's too far out, holding our arms out here, and it's just too far out, it's too cold or it's too hot. We need to get rid of some of those expectations. And so that's the second thing is adapt new expectations that actually are realistic, that actually work, and that's what I did. I looked at my life with my son and said, you know what? It's not realistic that I have to be a perfect parent. You know what actually happened to me? In one sense, it improved my ability to be a counselor because now I could really feel what other parents were feeling when their kids were in crisis. It improved my desire to write and to explain certain things in my writing after I'd gone through a crisis with my son. So it helped. It never hindered. I really thought it was going to diminish. What it actually did was increase. So I gave up those other expectations and took new ones on, more realistic ones. The speaking was the same thing. I felt more comfortable. I actually felt for the first time in some situations that I could really empathize with other parents and felt one with let's say, the majority of parents that go through some real crises with their kids. Everything had gone so smoothly with my kids, it was like refreshing after it actually happened. So I could feel and understand. And that was a very, very major change in my life. But see, I brought the parenting thing in my own life back closer to reality, and then I got more energy. And now I'm more capable of going through whatever crisis I have to go through in the future with more energy. I don't like losing that energy. If your garden could talk, what would it say to you? What would we be talking about? If your parenting part of your garden could talk, what are your kids saying? How's it going? Is it spread where you feel very uncomfortable losing energy, or is it closer to reality? One of the great things about kids is you can literally go to them at most ages and say to them, how are we doing as a family? How am I doing as a parent? As you know, kids are really thrilled to talk about that. You know, how we're doing. And see, that they actually have a built-in, in one sense, parenting manual inside of them because they know what it feels like to be parented. So you might as well ask the ones you're parenting, how are we doing and how can we get it close as we can to reality? We've had a number of gardens in our life, and the one that we had, and when we were in Texas, remember I'd cultivate it all up, put all this fertilizer on it, and I put mulch, and I put all the things I thought you should put on a garden. I really never read that much, again, my personality. I never read that many details about what you should have in a garden. But we planted all these things. The beans came up about 10 inches, and they all browned out and died. The carrots came up and basically started looking like this. They came about that far, and then they looked like this, okay? And various things in our garden. The tomatoes came up, and they all started browning and starting to turn dark on the bottom and rotted, even before we had a chance to pick them. And so if my garden could talk, let's say that I went out one morning and I just said, howdy, how y'all doing? And right off, the beans would have said, get a clue. You know, you see the brown leaves on us and we're 9 inches and I'm telling you, one more inch and we're history. Do you have any idea how much nitrogen is in the soil? I mean, what did you do to this ground? See, there's way too much nitrogen. I didn't even know that nitrogen, too much nitrogen is like a weed killer. I mean, that's how you kill the weeds. You give them too much nitrogen, they grow like crazy and die. I was doing that to every part of my garden. As I walked over to the carrots, I could have said, bless your heart, look at you. How you guys doing? And they could have said, same thing's true with us. Look at, there's so much nitrogen just burning us up. Do you think we can grow in this condition? We don't get enough water? I mean, look. Oh, all right. Now, that's one response. What if I had gone over to my carrots and said something like this? Hey, you know how much time and money I've put in to this garden? Is this the thanks I get for what you're doing? Dude, Christmas. I'll tell you what, I'm coming back tomorrow morning, and either you guys look better or you're history. See, that's a different kind of approach to gardening. The key to gardening is saying to ourselves, what does my garden look like? How are the 5 main areas of my garden doing? What do we need to do in those main areas in order to see each area becoming healthy and alive as they can be? If your garden could talk, what would it be saying? What would your carrots be saying? Or carrot? Say, what would your, okay, what each area? This session is how you can build your own garden and make it strong and get energy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the stages of life. I mean, it's not that complicated because we realize now that when we enter the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, we need to make sure that the main areas of our identity, you know, our job, our mate, a parent, a friend, our spiritual life, those things are healthy. Also, I find that it's very important to understand what your mate considers to be their main area so that you can be encouraging them in those areas and being careful that we're not dishonoring them in those areas by being too critical, because that's where we lose our energy. That's what leads us to depression. Now, this has been a tremendous help in my marriage. I know that it can be in yours.